we have far more in common than what divides us. When you talk about Pentecostals, charismatics, evangelicals, fundamentalists, Catholics, Methodist, Baptist, Presbyterian, on and on and on. Well, they would all say, we believe in the Trinity, we believe in the Bible, we believe in the resurrection, we believe salvation is through Jesus Christ. These are the big issues. Sometimes Protestants think that Catholics worship Mary like she's another God. But that's not exactly Catholic doctrine. There's the understanding, and people say, well, what are the saints all about? Why are you praying to the saints? And when you understand what they mean by what they're saying, there's a whole lot more commonality. Now, there's still real differences. No doubt about that. But the most important thing is, if you love Jesus, we're on the same team. The unity that I think we would see realistically is not a structural unity, but a unity of mission. And so when it comes to the family, we are co-workers in the field on this for the protection of what we call the sanctity of life, the sanctity of sex, and the sanctity of marriage. So there's a great commonality, and there's no division on any of those three. Many times people have been beaten down for taking a biblical stance. And they start to feel, well, maybe I'm out here all by yourself. No, you're not. The church is growing in Latin America. The church is growing in Asia. The church is growing in Africa. It's not growing in North America or Europe, but it is growing everywhere else. And so we kind of have this feeling that maybe we're not as influential, but we're far more influential than people realize.
My family is still Roman Catholic, and they still pray to Mary and the saints. Will this cause them to be kept out of heaven, even though they claim to trust Christ for their salvation?
Maybe. I mean, it's a gross act of idolatry to be praying to Mary and to the saints. That's a very serious matter. And I think that there are thousands, perhaps millions of people within the Roman Catholic Church who really are trusting in Christ and Christ alone for their salvation, not trusting the way of salvation that their own church teaches. Just like there are multitudes of people in Presbyterian churches that don't believe in the Reformed doctrines. So that's the happy inconsistency of our friends who are in Rome. But they have to understand, as I'll be talking about this afternoon, that Rome has categorically, consistently, and clearly denied the gospel. And no matter all other good things that they do, opposing abortion and affirming the Trinity and all of that, the anathematizing of the gospel at the 6th session of the Council of Trent, which has never been rescinded and reaffirmed as recently as the Catholic Catechism, disqualifies Rome, in my opinion, as a valid church. And I think it's an apostate body. And so with that in mind, I believe that every true Christian who really is trusting in Christ has a moral obligation to leave that communion and to identify themselves with the church, not that it's a perfect church, but a church that is a valid church, a church that doesn't deny an essential truth of the Christian faith. And as long as the gospel is an essential truth of the Christian faith, you don't want to be in a communion that denies it. And you get into this kind of stuff where, yeah, I believe in Jesus, but I'm praying to his mother. Or I'm praying to these saints, I'm attributing to his mother and to the saints the powers of intercession that belong only to the mediator, to Christ himself. You know, for example, most people who go to churches, whatever communion they're in, are not all that deeply informed about the theology of that particular communion or what's going on even in the worship service. I, for example, being a student of Roman Catholic theology, could not possibly participate in a Mass because I know what the doctrine of the Mass is, that the Church teaches that you have a real sacrifice of Christ in the Mass. Unbloody, to be sure, but it's still a sacrifice. And again, at Trent, it is defined in terms of sacrifice. I had a friend who was in the Roman Catholic Communion, was leaving it, and we had a discussion about that. He went to his priest and complained about this business of the sacrifice, and the priest told him, he said, well, your friend doesn't know the Latin of what we really teach, and he came with that to me, and so I showed him Trent, and I said, you ask your priest what the Latin term sacrificium means in English, and that was the end of it. It's a real sacrifice. I mean, there are priests out there who don't believe it's a real sacrifice, even an unbloody one. But that's the official teaching of the church. Now, how can you believe in the once-for-all atonement of Christ and participate in a celebration of his being sacrificed again, as unbloody as that may be? That's ghastly.
May it never be.
Other than that, I don't have opinion.